안녕하세요. 꾸준한 영어 타드쌤입니다. 자, 낭독 전에 가장 사랑받는 영민시선 100선 그 중에서 As I Grew Older 하는 시를 읽어보도록 하겠습니다. Langston Hughes 라고 하는 시인이 쓴 시로서 흑인 차별이 심했던 1900년대 초에 활동했던 시인입니다. 자라면서 겪게 되는 인종차별적 어려움과 그로 인해서 겪어야 했던 많은 좌절들을 극복해내고자 하는 의지를 노래한 시라고 합니다. 많은 이들에게 그 극복에 힘을 실어주는 시로서 사랑받는다고 하는데 어떤 시일지 같이 한번 읽어보도록 하겠습니다. As I Grew Older by Langston Hughes. It was a long time ago. I have almost forgotten my dream. But it was there then, in front of me, bright like a sun, my dream. And then the world rose slowly, slowly, between me and my dream. Rose until it touched the sky, the wall, shadow. I am black. I lie down in the shadow. No longer the light of my dream before me, above me. Only the thick wall, only the shadow. My hands, my dark hands, break it through the wall. Find my dream. Help me to shadow this darkness, to smash this night, to break this shadow into 1,000 lights of sun, into 1,000 whirling dreams of sun. 와우, 굉장히 직설적인데요. 예, 흑인입니다. 라고 하는 나의 까만 손으로 벽을 부시겠다는 얘기. 예, 그렇죠. 현실적인 자신에 대한 냉정한 관찰과 거기에 대해서 직관적인 어떤 극복 의지를 표명한 시라고 볼 수 있겠네요. 와우, 참 시의 문외한이었던 저가 영시를 통해서 조금씩 시라는 것을 알아가는 것 같습니다. 물론 이제 첫 발을 디딘 제가 다 할 수는 없지만 예, 뭔가 자극을 받는다는 느낌이 들어서 시를 읽는 게 굉장히 재밌어지는 것 같습니다. 자, 이제 낭독에 들어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 오늘은 제가 이 책을 읽는 성우라고 생각을 하고 성우 버전으로 한번 읽어보겠습니다. 막 제 마음대로 감정도 넣어보고 한번 그려볼게요. Vernacular. A few words on the humble origins of Vampire Rabbit, the eternal use of a fictional dog, and the passage of time. 1979, that is the year Vernacular was first published. Impossible. Harold hasn't grown any older. How is it that I have? Oh, that's right. I'm not a fictional character. Just my luck. Sometimes I feel as if I were inside a story, though. One I could never have imagined. A story with thousands of characters, unexpected plot twists, and no end in sight. That's the best part. It's a story that's still being written. It started with only a handful of characters, two. To be exact, one night in 1977, two underemployed actors, a husband and wife who didn't know the first thing about writing a children's book, sat down at their tomato-red kitchen table and jotted some notice about a vampire rabbit and a typical American family with whom he came to reside. There were a brother and sister, their parents, a cat named Chester, and, of course, Count Bunnicula, the mysterious rabbit. By the next day, the brother and sister had become two brothers, and another pet had been added to the family, Harold, a dog. Bunnicula, a rabbit tale of mystery by Deborah and James Hughes, was published in April 1979. Debbie, who had been diagnosed with cancer several months into the writing of the book, did not live to see it in print. She died in June 1978 at the age of 31. Getting on with my life as best I could, I continued with my day job as an assistant to a literary agent while going to school in the evenings to earn a master's degree in theater directing. I had lost interest in an acting career, and gave little thought to the book Debbie and I had written just for fun or the impact its publication might have. Although, truth be told, the day I first held the published book in my hands was one of the most thrilling of my life. The impact, however, occurred gradually. One day, I found an envelope in my mailbox with my name and address written in pencil in a childlike hand. What in the world can this be? I asked myself as I tore it open and withdrew the letter from inside. No wonder the handwriting had been childlike. The letter was from a child. It had never occurred to me that I would get actual letters from actual readers. And then there was my first invitation to speak in a school. When the day came, I wore a three-piece suit. That's how important I thought it was. When Bunnicula won its first Children's Choice Award, Nebraska's Golden Silver Award, I scribbled my acceptance speech on a scrap of paper while on the plane to Lincoln, Nebraska, only to be informed when I arrived that I was the morning program. 3 hours worth for an audience of librarians and teachers. It was that morning that I discovered that I could think and talk on my feet. But I was discovering something else as well. Not only was Bunnicula becoming a popular book, it was taking on a life of its own. And that life was turning my life into the story with thousands of characters and unexpected plot twists. The large cast of characters included readers and parents, teachers and librarians, fellow authors and illustrators, and a vast array of publishing people, all of whom were absolutely devoted to something called children's literature. I was becoming part of a world I hadn't even known existed a few short years ago. In 1981, I left my job with the literary agency where I had worked for 7 years, gave up my aspirations of becoming a theater director, and did what my mother had always said I should do. I became a writer. That year, I completed a Holiday Inn, the first of 6 sequels to Bunnicula. That was also the year I believed that I was invited to be on a local TV children's talk show in Baltimore, Maryland. I was on for all of 2 minutes at the end of the program, and the first question I was asked by a 12-year-old girl was, "Why did you put all those hard words in your book?" Hard words? I had no idea I had put hard words in Bunnicula. I don't remember what I answered. Beyond, uh, mm, but I have often thought of that. I have often thought of that moment because it made me grateful that Davy and I had not really known what we were doing when we wrote the book. We had no idea what kind of books the children were reading, or how we might gear the vocabulary or sentence structure or humor to someone younger than ourselves. We wrote a book that made us laugh, that entertained us first and foremost. And that is a key to the book's success, I think, because in writing something that truly made us laugh, we were able to make others laugh as well. Through the years, I have often been told that Bunnicula has opened the door to reading for many children, even with all those hard words. What an unexpected plot twist that was! There have been many other plot twists to Bunnicula words, translations into foreign languages, to audio tape versions, play adaptations that have been staged all across the country, an animated TV special back in the 1980s, picture books, chapter books, active books, a joke book, and a pop-up book, a series featuring Howie the Dachshund puppy, puppy, Howie the Dachshund puppy, one of my favorite characters to write. Howie showed up unexpectedly at the end of a Holiday Inn and has been an important part of the books ever since. Letters and more letters from readers. And now a whole new generation of readers. But the best plot twist of all is still the fact that this book has opened the door for so many young people to enter the world of reading. But Nicola opened the door wide for me as well, to a life of writing and a world of characters, both real and fictional, that I could never have imagined sitting at that tomato red kitchen table so long ago. Despite the difference in our ages, Harold is one of my oldest and dearest of friends. Perhaps he is one of yours too. Or perhaps you are about to meet him for the first time as you turn the pages that follow. Welcome, or welcome back, to his story, and thank you for being a part of my own. J.H. Editor's Note: the book you are about to read was brought to my attention in a most unusual way. One Friday afternoon, just before closing time, I heard a scratching sound at the front door of my office. When I opened the door, there before me stood a sad-eyed, droopy-eared dog carrying a large plain envelope in his mouth. He dropped it at my feet, gave me a soulful glance, and with a great, quiet dignity sauntered away. Inside the envelope was the manuscript of the book you now hold in your hands, together with this letter. Gentlemen, the enclosed story is true. It happened in this very town, to me and the family with whom I reside. I have changed the names of the family in order to protect them, but in all other respects, everything you will read here is factual. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Harold. I come to writing purely by chance. My full-time occupation is dog. I live with Mr. and Mrs. X, called here the Monroes, and their two sons, Toby, aged 8, and Pete, aged 10. Also sharing our home is a cat named Chester, whom I am pleased to call my friend. We were a typical American family, and still are, though the events related in my story have, of course, had their effect on our lives. I hope you will find this tale of sufficient interest to yourself and your readers to warrant its publication. Sincerely, Harold X.
Bunnicula, A Rabbit Tale of Mystery, Chapter 1. The Arrival. I shall never forget the first time I laid these now tired old eyes on our visitor. I had been left home by the family, with the admonition to take care of the house until they returned. That's something they always say to me when they go out. Take care of the house, Harold. You are the watchdog. I think it's their way of making up for not taking me with them, as if I wanted to go anyway. You can't lie down at the movies and still see the screen, and people think you are being impolite if you fall asleep and start to snore or scratch yourself in public. No, thank you. I'd rather be stretched out on my favorite rug in front of a nice whistling radiator. But I digress. I was talking about that first night. Well, it was cold, the rain was pelting the windows, the wind was howling, and it felt pretty good to be indoors. I was lying on the rug, with my head on my paws, just staring absently at the front door. My friend Chester was curled up on the brown velvet armchair, which years ago he'd staked out as his own. I saw that once again he'd covered the whole seat with his cat hair, and I chuckled to myself, picturing the scene tomorrow. Next to grasshoppers, there is nothing that frightens Chester more than the vacuum cleaner. In the midst of this reverie, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't even bother to get up and see who it was. I knew it had to be my family, the Monroes, since it was just about the time for the movie to be over. After a moment, the front door flew open. There they stood in the doorway, Toby and Pete and Mom and Dad Monroe. There was a flash of lightning, and in its glare I noticed that Mr. Monroe was carrying a little bundle, a bundle with tiny glistening eyes. Pete and Toby bounded into the room, both talking at the top of their lungs. Toby shouted, "Put him over here, Dad." "Take your boots off, you're soaking wet," replied his mother. Somewhat calmly, I thought, under the circumstances. "But, Mom, what about—" "First stop dripping on the carpet. Would somebody like to take this?" asked Mr. Monroe, indicating the bundle with the eyes. "I'd like to remove my coat." "I will," Pete yelled. "No, I will," said Toby. "I found him. You were dropping." "I will not. You were too." "Mom, Pete punched me." "I'll take him," said Mrs. Monroe. "Take off your coats this minute." But she became so involved in helping the boys out of their coats that she didn't take him at all. My tranquil evening had been destroyed, and no one had even said hello to me. I whimpered to remind them that I was there. "Harold," cried Toby, "guess what happened to me?" And then, all over again, everyone started talking at once. At this point, I feel I must explain something. In our family, everyone treats everyone else with great respect for his or her intelligence. That goes for the animals as well as the people. Everything that happens to them is explained to us. It's never been just a good boy, Harold, or used a little box, Chester, at our house. Oh no, with us, it's, "Hey, Harold, Dad got a raise and now we're in a higher tax bracket." Or, "Come sit on the bed, Chester, and watch this Wild Kingdom show. Maybe you will see a relative." Which shows just how thoughtful they are. But after all, Mr. Monroe is a college professor and Mrs. Monroe is a lawyer. So we think of it as a rather special household, and we are, therefore, rather special pets. So it wasn't at all surprising to me that they took the time to explain the strange circumstances surrounding the arrival of the little bundle with the glistening eyes now among us. It seems that they had arrived at the theater late. And rather than trip over the feet of the audience already seated, they decided to sit in the last row, which was empty. They tiptoed in and sat down very quietly, so they weren't to disturb anyone. Suddenly, Toby, who was the little one, sprang up from his chair and squealed that he had sat on something. Mr. Monroe told him to stop making a fuss and move to another seat. But in an unusual display of independence, Toby said he wanted to see just what it was he had sat on. An usher came over to their row to shush them, and Mr. Monroe borrowed his flashlight. What they found on Toby's chair was the little blanket bundle that was now sitting on Mr. Monroe's lap. They now unwrapped the blanket, and there in the center was a tiny black and white rabbit, sitting in a shoebox filled with dirt. A piece of paper had been tied to his neck with a ribbon. There were words on the paper, but the Monroes were unable to decipher them because they were in a totally unfamiliar language. I moved closer for a better look. Now, most people might call me a mongrel, but I have some pretty fancy bloodlines running through these veins, and the Russian wolfhound happens to be one of them. Because my family got around a lot, I was able to recognize the language as an obscure dialect of the Carpathian mountain region. Roughly translated, it read, "Take good care of my baby," but I couldn't tell if it was a note from a bereaved mother or a piece of Romanian sheet music. The little guy was shivering from fear and cold. It was decided that Mr. Monroe and the boys would make a house for him out of an old crate and some heavy-duty wire mesh from the garage. For the night, the boys would make a bed for him in the shoebox. Toby and Pete ran outside to find the crate, and Mrs. Monroe went to the kitchen to get him some milk and lettuce. Mr. Monroe sat down, a dazed expression in his eyes, as if he were wondering how he came to be sitting in his own living room in a wet raincoat with a strange bunny on his lap. I signaled to Chester, and the two of us casually moseyed over to a corner of the room. We looked at each other. "Well, what do you think?" I asked. "I don't think rabbits like milk," he answered. Chester and I were unable to continue our conversation because a deafening crash commanded our attention. Pete yelled from the hallway, "Ma, Toby broke the rabbit's house." "I didn't. I just dropped it. Pete won't let me carry it. It's too big. Toby's too little. I'm not. You're too." "Okay, fellas," Mrs. Monroe called out as she entered with the milk and lettuce. "Let's try to get it in here with as little hysteria as possible, please." Chatter turned to me and said under his breath, "That lettuce looks repulsive, but if there's any milk left, I get it." I certainly wasn't going to argue with him. I'm a waterman myself. At that moment, the crate arrived, barely standing the strain of being pulled in two directions at once. "Ma, Toby said he's gonna keep the rabbit in his room." "That's not fair. Harold sleeps in his room." "Only sometimes," I thought, "when I know he's got a leftover ham sandwich in his drawer. Toby's a nice kid, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't hurt that he shared his stash with me." It was, after all, at one of those late-night parties in Toby's room that I first developed my taste for chocolate cake, and Toby, noting my preference, has kept me in chocolate cake ever since. Pete, on the other hand, doesn't believe in sharing, and the only time I tried to sleep on his bed, he rolled over on me and pinned me by my ears so that I couldn't move for the rest of the night. I had a crick in my neck for days. "But he's mine," Toby said. "I found him." "You sat on him, you mean." "I found him, and he's sleeping in my room." "You can keep Smelly Old Harold in your room, and Chester too, if you want to, but I'm gonna keep the rabbit in mine." Smelly Old Harold? I would have bitten his ankle, but I knew he hadn't changed his socks for a week. Smelly indeed. Mr. Monroe spoke up. "I think the best place for the rabbit is right here in the living room on that table by the window. It's light there, and he will get lots of fresh air." "Pete's taller than I am," Toby cried. "He will be able to see the rabbit better." Too bad, Squirt. Okay, said Mrs. Monroe through clenched teeth. Let's print to bed and make him comfortable, and then we can all get some sleep. Why? Pete asked. I don't want to go to sleep. Mrs. Monroe smiled a little too sweetly at Pete. Look, Ma, said Toby. He's not drinking his milk. Chester nudged me in the ribs. Didn't I kill you? He asked. Excuse me while I make myself available. Hey, said Toby, we gotta name him. Can that wait until tomorrow? Asked Mr. Monroe. The boys shouted in unison. No, he has to have a name right now. I have to say I agreed with them. It took them 3 days to name me, and those were the 3 most anxious days of my life. I couldn't sleep at all, worrying that they were really gonna call me Fluffy as Mrs. Monroe had suggested. Well, all right, sighed Mrs. Monroe. What about, oh, say, Bun Bun? Uh-oh, there she goes again, I thought. Where did she get them? Yuck, we all said. Well then, how about Fluffy? She offered hopefully. Pete looked at his mother and smiled. You never give up, do you, Ma? Meanwhile, Chester, who had also been named Fluffy for a short time, was rubbing against Mrs. Monroe's ankle and purring loudly. No, Chester, not now, she said, pushing him aside. You want to help us name him, don't you, Chester? Toby asked, as he scooped him up into his arms. Chester shot me a look. I could tell this was not what he had in mind. Come on, Harold, Toby called. You've got to help with the name, too. I joined the family, and the serious thinking began. We all peered into the box. It was the first time I had really seen him. So, this is a rabbit, I thought. He sort of looks like a Chester, only he's got longer ears and a shorter tail, and a motor in his nose. Well, said Pete, after a moment, since we found him at the movies, why don't we call him Mr. Johnson? There was a moment of silence. Who's Mr. Johnson? Asked Toby. The guy who owns the movie theater. Pete answered. No one seemed to like the idea. How about the prince? Said Mr. Monroe. Dad, said Toby. Are you kidding? Well, I had a dog named Prince once. He replied lamely. Prince, I thought. That's a silly name for a dog. We found him at a Dracula movie. Let's call him Dracula, Toby said. That's a stupid name, said Pete. No, it's not. And anyway, I found him, so I should get to name him. Mom, you're not gonna let him name him, are you? That's favoritism, and I'll be traumatized if you do. Mrs. Monroe looked in wonder at Pete. Please, Mom, please, Dad, let's name him Dracula, cried Toby. Please, please, please. And with each please, he squeezed Chester a little harder. Mrs. Monroe picked up the bowl of milk and moved toward the kitchen. Chester followed her every movement with his eyes, which now seemed to be popping out of his head. When she reached the kitchen door, she turned back and said, Let's not have any more arguments. We'll compromise. He's a bunny, and we found him at a Dracula movie, so we'll call him Bunnicula. Bunnicula, that should make everybody happy, including me. What about me? Muttered Chester. I won't be happy until she puts down that milk. Well, guys, is that okay with you? She asked. Toby and Pete looked at one another, and then at the rabbit. A smile grew on Toby's face. Yeah, Ma, I think the name is just right. Pete shrugged. It's okay, but I get to fit in. Okay, I'm gonna put the milk back in the fridge. Maybe he will drink it tomorrow. What about Chester? Toby said, dropping the frantic cat to the floor. Maybe he would like it. Chester made a beeline for Mrs. Monroe and looked up at her plaintively. Oh, Chester doesn't want any more milk, do you, Chester? You've already had your milk today. She reached down, patted Chester on his head, and walked into the kitchen. Chester didn't move. Okay, bedtime, said Mr. Monroe. Good night, Bunnicula, Toby said. Good night, Count Bunnicula, Pete said sarcastically, in what I took to be his attempt at a Transylvanian accent. I may be wrong, but I thought I saw a flicker of movement from the cage. Good night, Harold. Good night, Chester. I licked Toby good night. Good night, Smelly Harold. Good night, dumb Chester. I drooled on Peter's foot. Mom, Harold drooled on my foot. Good night, Pete, Mrs. Murnau said with great finality as she came back into the living room. And then more calmly, good night, Harold, good night, Chester. Mr. and Mrs. Murnau went up the stairs together. You know, dear, Mr. Murnau said, that was very clever, Bunnicula. I could never have thought of a name like that. Oh, I don't know, Robert. She smiled as she put her arm through his. I think Prince is a lovely name, too. The room was quiet. Chester was still sitting by the closed kitchen door, in a state of shock. Slowly, he turned to me. I wish they had named him Fluffy, was all he said. Chapter 2. Music in the Night. I feel at this time there are a few things you should know about Chester. He is not your ordinary cat. But then, I'm not your ordinary dog, since an ordinary dog wouldn't be writing this book, would he? Chester came into the house several years ago as a birthday gift for Mr. Monroe, along with 2 volumes of G.K. Chesterton, hence the name Chester, and a first edition of Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. As a result of this introduction to literature, and given the fact that Mr. Monroe is an English professor, Chester developed a taste of reading early in life. I, on the other hand, have developed a taste for books. I found Jonathan Livingston Seagull particularly delicious. From Chester's kittenhood on, Mr. Monroe has used him as a sounding board for all his students' lectures. If Chester doesn't fall asleep when Mr. Monroe is talking, the lecture can be counted a success. Every night, when the family is sleeping, Chester goes to the bookshelf, selects his midnight reading, and calls up on his favorite chair. He especially likes mystery stories and the tales of horror and the supernatural. As a result, he has developed a very vivid imagination. I'm telling you this because I think it's important for you to know something of Chester's background before I relate to you the story of the events following the arrival of Bunnicula into our home. Let me begin with that first night. It seems that after I went to sleep, Chester, still stewing over the lost milk, settled down with his latest book and attempted to ignore the rumbling in his stomach. The room was dark and quiet. This did not prevent his reading, of course, since, as you know, cats can see in the dark. A shaft of moonlight fell across the rabbit's cage and spilled onto the floor below. The wind and the rain had stopped, and as Chester read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, he became increasingly aware of the eerie stillness that had taken their place. As Chester tells it, he suddenly felt compelled to look at the rabbit. I don't know what came over me, he said to me the next morning, but a cold chill ran down my spine. The little bunny had begun to move for the first time since he had been put in his cage. He lifted his tiny nose and inhaled deeply as if gathering sustenance from the moonlight. He slicked his ears back close to his body, and for the first time, Chester said, I noticed the peculiar marking on his forehead. What had seemed an ordinary black spot between his ears took on a strange V-shape, which connected with the big black patch that covered his back and each side of his neck. It looked as if he was wearing a coat. No, more like a cape than a coat. Through the silence had drifted the strains of a remote and exotic music. I could have sworn it was a gypsy violin. Chester told me. I thought perhaps a caravan was passing by, so I ran to the window. I remembered my mother telling me something about the caravans when I was a puppy, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what. What's a caravan? I asked, feeling a little stupid. A caravan is a band of gypsies traveling through the forest in their wagons. Chester answered, "Oh yes." It was coming back to me now. Station wagons? No, covered wagons. The gypsies travel all through the land, setting up camps around great bonfires, doing magical tricks, and sometimes, if you crush their palms with a piece of silver, they will tell your fortune. You mean if I gave them a fork, they'd tell my fortune? I asked, breathlessly. Chatter looked at me with disdain. Save your silverware, he said. It wasn't a caravan after all. I was disappointed. What was it? I asked. Chatter explained that when he looked out the window, he saw Professor Micklewhite, our next door neighbor, playing the violin in his living room. He listened for a few moments to the haunting melody and sighed with relief. I've really got to stop reading these horror stories late at night, he thought. It's beginning to affect my mind. He yawned and turned to go back to his chair and get some sleep. As he turned, however, he was startled by what he saw. There in the moonlight, as the music filtered through the air, sat the bunny, his eyes intense and staring, an unearthly aura about them. Now this is the part you wouldn't believe, Chatter said to me, but as I watched, his lips parted in a hideous smile, and where rabbit buck-tails should have been, two little pointed fangs glistened. I wasn't sure on what to make of Chester's story, but the way he told it, it set my hair on end.